Hey y'all, welcome to day 23 of the Visibility Challenge on Convos with Bree, Bree. Today I am going to get really vulnerable with y'all. I used to think that the only way that I could truly help others and get paid to help others, like make this my actual career, it meant that I had to be perfect. Like, I had to be my highest self. I had to be my favorite form all the time in every area, all the way through. So, when I would run into issues with body dysmorphia, with lack of confidence, with financial struggles, with all of these different things that I struggle with, I felt like if I shared them with y'all, you wouldn't want to work with me. You wouldn't trust me because if I couldn't figure it out in my own life and consistently stay on it, how would I ever expect anyone else to think that I could help them? And then I found myself in some of the bleakest places of my life. I found myself completely lost. I didn't feel like one single area of my life was anything that I would want even myself to mirror. And that was before I started on this path of making this my entire career. And this funny thing happened where I was at my most depressed. I was begging life to take me out because I knew I wasn't going to do it myself. But I didn't think that I had the courage or the strength to go on. I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't maintain my relationships. My job felt like, oh, it was just awful. Everything about it felt wrong. Being alive just felt wrong. I was so lost and so sad, and I just couldn't get my feet anywhere near the ground. But when I did have to leave my house, get out of bed, I had to get groceries, I had to make food, I had to, go to work, I had to pay the bills, I had to still try, even though I didn't feel like I had any ability to try. I had to. There wasn't another choice. And I would go out to the store and people would just do as they have always done and they would be drawn to me. And I felt like I was in a place where I didn't have anything to give myself, let alone anyone else. But yet there I was at the counter listening to the girl who was telling me her biggest fears and telling me all the things that she felt she couldn't handle and things that she'd been through. And the woman next to me in the aisle was telling me how she was never going to lose weight and how hard life had been and how much of a toll this put on her body and how low she felt about herself. And in those moments, I didn't make anything about me. I made it about them because it wasn't hard for me to see them. It wasn't hard for me to relate and be compassionate and to check in and help them through their moment. They had no idea what I was going through. And I masked so well that they were looking at me, and I realized when they saw me, they felt like I had it all together without knowing anything about me. And I was able to, in that moment, prove them right. It wasn't that that was my personal truth, but in that moment, it didn't matter what I was going through. I could always rise above to be what somebody else needed. And I started seeing this more and more. And I started to come out of my own depression and my own funk because my thoughts were going away from how terrible my current present was and going into how good it felt to help them. And then I started seeing all these stories about people who were making the biggest impact in other people's lives. And they were coming from these super dark, isolating spaces. Their entire life had fallen apart. Their entire world was in shambles. And their purpose, their reason for getting out of bed was to do what they do for others and with others. And I really, really liked the way that felt in my thoughts, in my body, and what it did to my life. So the visibility challenge is about showing up even when I feel like I can't. And yesterday and today, I've been having some harder moments with body dysmorphia, with trusting the process, with just leaning into my own life. But that's not affecting me negatively in any way, shape, or form with what I do with my Convo crew. In fact, I think it's making me better. It's making me even better at what I am here to do. And I said I started this because I wanted to let this layer of vulnerability out in a new way. And I wanted to be more honest, more authentic, more myself, especially in the hard moments. I have no problem showing up when I feel great. And I've been looking back on who I was when I was in my best body, my best career, my all of these things, like the pieces of my journey that I felt were really strong. And I'm looking at all the times that I felt this way. And I'm making correlations, I'm finding patterns so that I can not only deepen my understanding for myself, but I can do it and bring it here as well. So today, I want to talk a bit about body dysmorphia. I have always struggled with this. And I said in a few episodes that I gained the weight back intentionally. And I didn't really dive into that too much. This is because of body dysmorphia. I'm starting to see where when I was fit, y'all. I was feeling really good. My clothes were easy to put on. I didn't have to worry about, is a medium really a medium? Is a large really a large? Is a small really a small? I could just put on anything and it just fit my body. And I felt good in everything I put on. I felt good when I didn't have anything on. I felt good in my body all the time. But I was walking a lot and I was energized a lot. I was eating well. I was taking the supplements that I needed to take and putting all the vitamins into my body that I needed, I know I needed, and making sure my protein was lit. And I was doing all of these things, but I started to notice a heaviness in my body again. And I started to feel like there was still something wrong with what I was doing. Something about it, it was great on paper, but it wasn't great internally. And there was something that I was still missing. And then I noticed that I was getting to a point where if I would eat, I just didn't feel good. And granted, a lot of this could be our food here because most of us know by now they put wax on our fruit to preserve it. Everything that they told us was good for us was pretty much a lie. And this whole thing has kind of just been about control and not about the actual care of the humans in this world. And other countries don't have the same issues with their food that we do. And I got really angry at the government, at the people in charge, at the way that they were misusing their power. And obviously that didn't get any better because we all know what's been coming out. And it put this strain on my world that felt like I didn't even have control over such simple, basic needs. And it made me feel extremely distrusting in literally every source that's out there. And it made me feel like I was overwhelmed with incorrect information and I didn't really want to play anymore. So I decided that I needed to look at this experience more differently because I was already feeling the change coming in. I knew that I wasn't going to maintain what I had been maintaining for so long at this point. Like, this was the longest I had ever managed to not fluctuate in weight. And I was staying consistent with my patterns and my habits. And I felt really good about that. But I still didn't feel like I was supposed to when I looked this way, when I had my life going this way. Something was still not connecting. And I wanted to find out what that was. So I started looking at pictures and I was like, man, I look so good in all these pictures. But then I would see myself in the mirror and I didn't feel the same. And when I really started to notice this, I was a personal trainer at a gym and I was in Arizona. So I was tan. I was walking every day, swimming every day. I was in the hot tub every day. I had a gym that had a cold plunge, so I would get in and do that. And they say that that's not for women, but I don't know that that is true because I have never felt more peaceful, and 10 minutes has never felt more blissful in my entire life. I wished that I could stay in that cold plunge for hours. Where my mind went, I can't even describe the feeling, y'all. It was incredible. And I was doing so many things that kept me feeling good. And then I went back to the Midwest and where we were in the Ozarks, I didn't feel comfortable walking. I didn't feel like I didn't feel comfortable going to the gym because I had to drive like 30 minutes there, 30 minutes back on these windy hills. And they didn't have the cold plunge, and the sauna was just all right, but it was already so hot and humid outside. And my job, I was running and walking everywhere all day. So it should have been doing the same thing, but I was never having moments of just solitude where I could just be. And I started gaining weight, even though I was still doing the majority of those habits that were keeping me healthy. But my body and my brain weren't responding the same. And I immediately went to this theory that I've always had. And that is that weight is not just about what you put in and what you put out and what you do. If your mental cannot get on board, you will stay unhealthy. You will still see things that might not even be there. And you will look at yourself and your life and the experience as an overall whole in a like with a negative lens. And it's not all the time. So there's a lot of moments where I was feeling really good. But at the same time, there were more moments where I was catching myself in the mirror and I wasn't feeling good. Or I was feeling good, but then I would point out one part of my body that I wasn't feeling good about. And I would hone in on it. And I would beat myself up and I would think, man, I'm never going to be able to get rid of this. I'm never going to be as thin as I want to be or as fit as I want to be, or my posture will never be as good as I need it to be. The pain in my body will never not be with me. And those thoughts, I'd push them away and I'd say, no, 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 we're going to be kind to ourselves. We're not doing that. But I was still believing all those things. It's like when you tell somebody like, I don't know, I just don't feel very good about myself today. And they say, no, you're so beautiful and you're so this and that. And they're trying to build you up, right? But nothing lands. Nothing can get in there. And you're just like, I appreciate it. I do. But I can't believe that right now. I can't hear that that's actually for me. It feels like nothing. It's just bouncing right off of me. And nothing brought it on. Nobody said anything to me. Nobody did anything. It was just me versus me. And yesterday, I flipped the format and I almost couldn't even make the video. I had already recorded twice and I struggled with how I looked twice on video. And I tried to change it around. It wasn't what my brain was now used to seeing when I was recording. And the first place I went was, if they see me looking like this, why would they ever want to work with me? Why would these people continue to support me if they see how far I've fallen? And I haven't fallen far at all, y'all. I'm barely off track. I feel great. I really do. I feel good in this body 90% of the time. But then I look at these pictures of myself and I think, oh, I've fallen so far because I'm not liking what I'm seeing, because my brain is distorting the image, because my brain is begging my unconscious thoughts to come up to the surface. It's saying, please stop pushing us down. Please stop pretending this is all okay. Please, please, please. Just hear this. Feel this. Allow yourself to truly feel it so that you can understand there's still a part of you that is carrying this. And I immediately went back to when I was a kid. I was like junior high first. I was in cheerleading. And cheerleading really did some warped things to my brain because I wanted to be a flyer at first. I quickly found out that flying wasn't for me because my fear and my distrust in others was so much stronger than my motivation to be in the air. And then it was, well, you have to lose weight. And I wasn't heavy at all. But they were saying, you still weigh too much. You still have to lose weight in order to be in the air. And I felt like if I lost weight, I would be nothing. I would barely even be a person. But I saw the other flyers and they were just naturally tiny people. And I never was. I was always thick. I was muscular. I was curvy. But I was like the perfect weight. And I really liked how my body looked. But then I started to not. And then I started to pay attention to what other people thought about my body. And I paid attention to how they felt about their body. And I heard so many people that were in such a better body, I felt, than I was. And they hated themselves. Even the people that were flying, they were like, oh my gosh, I've got to lose weight. I've got to do this. I've got to, or I don't have any boobs. I don't have any butt. And they hated the shape of their body. And to me, they were perfect. They were perfect. And I couldn't understand if they don't love themselves, how could I ever love myself? Because I correlated it as like a group experience. And like there was one ideal body type. And I don't have to explain this to anyone because I know that the majority of the world understands this and feels this way as well, or has seen it in their own life. But man, the more I heard people tear themselves down, the more that I felt like, yeah, we should be better. We should be all of these things, and I should lose weight. And then I had a coach that just totally wanted me to get in the air and just try to fly as is. And I did, and it was fun and it was great. But then they dropped me, man. They dropped me on the track. My hip hurts just thinking about it. They dropped me on one of the coldest freaking game nights right on the track. And I landed so hard, and it was only because they weren't paying attention. They just weren't really paying attention. I also learned way later in life that a big part of this was because when I was a kid, I fell off a ladder and I hit my head and I was knocked out. And it was a crazy traumatic experience because someone was shaking the ladder to scare me. That's what caused the fall. So it was trauma on trauma. And when I woke up, they threatened my life. They said, if you tell anyone, I'll kill you. And I was young enough to believe that was true. So I hid it. And immediately after, I started getting this burning sensation all down my neck and in my ears. And it itched so deep and I couldn't get to it ever. And I wanted to just rip my entire ear canal out of my head. Like it was awful. And the doctors just kept putting me on antibiotics, but nobody could find anything that was wrong. And I was too scared to talk. My hearing started to go. My memory was not well anymore. I used to be so easily and naturally smart. Everything I learned, I took it in instantly, and I didn't have that ability anymore. And it felt like my brain got really lazy. If I didn't have a profound interest in it, I could no longer take in and retain any information. So all of these classes became absolutely impossible for me to learn anything in. And I was failing. I went from being an easy A student to barely scraping by, and nobody could figure it out. And my hearing it didn't fall into a box. It wasn't that I couldn't hear the sounds, it was that I couldn't process the information. But I fell through every single crack and nobody could figure it out. They just kept saying, something's wrong, but we don't know what. And that was that. Nobody said further testing. Nobody said, hey, here's what I think. They just went, I don't know. And they left. Or they said, I don't know. And they just passed me and hoped that one day I would figure it out, I guess, on my own. And so I truly just fell through the cracks. And that really damaged how I felt about myself. And, oh, y'all, I've never actually connected this before, that this would also be the time that I started to not like my body. And I started to fall into negative ways of thinking and negative energy so much easier. Because before I could ward off anything, nothing could hold me down, nothing could make me feel bad about myself, nothing could stop me from just being more me. But then after that, I was so angry. Like, I wanted to really hurt that person that hurt me. I wanted to ruin that person so that they could never, ever, ever feel anything good again because they took everything from me. And the worst part about it was I had to see that person every day and I had to pretend like things were fine. And that person kept hitting me and kept hurting me and kept being the meanest person in my life to me. And there was not a thing that I could do about it. And I really started to hate myself. I really, really hated myself. I thought that everything about me was trash. Everything about me was annoying and I shouldn't have been born and I should have never, ever came into this world. And so I was very young. And then right after or right around the same time this all happened, my grandma just suddenly went from being my safest, most favorite place on earth. And then I found out she had cancer. And it went to, hey, she's going to make it. It'll be okay. She's going to have surgery. They're going to get it. And then by the time she was back at that next appointment, the cancer was everywhere and she was gone. I blinked and she was gone. I had no idea that I wouldn't see her again. And after that, everything felt so heavy. And my parents, who I loved so much, were just absolutely devastated. And up until that point, I had no idea I could ever lose my mom, that I could ever lose anyone that was important to me. And then I couldn't unsee that. I couldn't unknow that information that one day everything could just be great. And then the next day it could just be hell on earth. And you can't ever go back. And then I felt like I was just living hell on earth. I wrote book 2. I left a lot of these things out of it because this is books of their own. But then book 2 happened, Young Writer's Day, Fragile Minds and the Adults That Mold Them, where my teachers were letting me down and the cops were more terrifying than they were helpful. And they were liars and they didn't take accountability. They didn't own what they did. Teachers abused their power and tried to threaten and scare children. They hurt us. They were not safe. And here I was trying to figure out how I'm going to learn now going forward, how I'm going to process the information that's coming in, how I can retrain my brain to hear things. And I am completely alone. And I saw that everyone around me was hurting. And we couldn't help each other because we didn't have any power. And I took all that and I just started hating everything about myself. And this is where it all started. This is that thing that I haven't been able to let go of. This is the thing that I haven't been able to connect. I hated everything. So I started hating my body as well. And the pain in my body started after that fall. And I found out years later, I still don't know how much validity goes into this, um, but I had a unique doctor look at brain scans that I had from years ago. And she noticed that my brain appeared to be rotated. And when I fell, she believed that my brain actually rotated and it cut off all of the pathway to my ears and created that burning and itching sensation, which was my body's way of trying to alert me that something was really wrong. And I took so many antibiotics trying to get it to stop. And then eventually I had all the scarring in my ears that typically comes from like a tubal surgery in your ears. And I never had that. So nobody could explain why out of nowhere it just happened. And nobody caught any of the things we needed to catch. And now I went in and I have a great audiologist, and they believe that I have auditory processing disorder. Well, the problem with that is there's no adult resources that I have ever been able to find. And where I live, there was only one doctor that was in the bordering state that even touched on this in adults. And they did not take any insurance. It was cash only, and it was a super long wait. And then when I tried to get on the waiting list, she appeared to be a ghost. There was no way to actually set an appointment. And I found out she retired years ago. And there was nothing else that replaced it. And I felt so defeated because every time in this journey, for as long as I've been trying to give myself answers and find building paths that will help me, I look for somebody who knows something that can help me connect these pieces. And every time I think, oh my God, I'm here. I'm here. I found it. Life goes, nope, that's not it. I got hearing aids and I was so excited because I could hear, but then it was so overwhelming and I couldn't process the sound. So it was just like noise in my ears. I wasn't hearing anyone better. I wasn't understanding anything better. It was just everything was louder. Now I could hear all these sounds that I had never heard before. And I was so overwhelmed. And my ears started developing cysts inside of them and pushing them out. So it physically hurt to wear them. So then I had to go back after 2 years of getting used to these to being without them. And when I did that, my hearing had actually decreased. So I didn't have the same tools and coping mechanisms I had had before I had the hearing aids. And that made me even more resentful, even more bitter. That made me angry all over again. And all my anger came flooding back to the person that hurt me. And I hated him. I didn't think I would ever be able to forgive him. I didn't think that I would ever be able to let it go. I thought I would die angry because I couldn't get over what he stole from me. I couldn't get over who I would have been if this had not happened to me. And I took every single moment that someone had been mean to me, that I had struggled, that life had been so much harder for me than it ever had to be. And I sealed it in that it was all his fault and that this was not supposed to happen. And I grieved who I should have been for so long, for so long. And it felt like I would never, ever be who I was supposed to be because he took something that I could never get back. But lately, because I allowed myself to gain some weight back and I allowed myself to just eat whatever I wanted to eat, and I allowed myself to be heavier than I'm comfortable being, and I'm allowing myself to be honest and push through body dysmorphia, because I know my body and my weight has nothing to do with my soul, with my core, with who I am and what I do. That's my own personal journey. And if somebody doesn't want to work with me because I don't look a certain way, or because they need me to have it all figured out first, that's not who I'm meant to work with. I'm meant to have my own journey while I help them go through theirs. It's what makes me so empathetic. It's what makes me so understanding, because I know now that I will never not be in a place of growth, in a place of learning, in a place of change, discomfort, all of that. I go to the resistance so that I can get uncomfortable, and I can find a way to be comfortable in this discomfort. That's where the most growth lies for me, and I think for most of us. So I'm looking back at my entire experience as a whole, and I'm seeing all these moments where I felt this way, but I didn't connect it to the core memory. I had them all as individual experiences. So every moment I write about in Young Writers Day, Fragile Minds and the Adults That Mold Them, all of those moments I have built worlds around these moments where somebody took something from me that I would never be able to get back. Somebody took my innocence. Somebody took my faith, my trust, my ability to learn. Somebody was so mean to me that I now feared and understood that I had to have groundwork in my foundation that knew what to do when people were this mean, because they would do it again. I let all of it be true. I gave it all power. I gave it all energy, and I was building around all of these individual moments to protect myself against them. But really, it was just the same core moment happening over and over and over again in new forms. And for a long time, instead of changing my reaction, I got angrier. I went to war. I put on armor. I went into this mode that said my survival is dependent on my ability to go to war with others. And yet, I am here to help and understand and empathize with others. That created this internal war. That created what I was missing, this piece of me that I felt I would never be able to get back because it was stolen from me over and over and over again. I was looking at that as proof that I would never be who I wanted to be. I would never be able to achieve the life that I wanted. I would never, ever, ever have what I was looking for, what I was working so hard for, and that none of it mattered, because this would always be my life. No matter how far I climb, there will always be somebody there to shake me down, to make me fall, to steal it all away. And I was missing the key fact. It happened. It happened. And if it wasn't going to happen, if it wasn't supposed to happen, it wouldn't have. I would be the person who didn't have this story. But I have no idea what that looks like. It could have been worse. I'm only picturing a successful life because it's unattainable to go back. So I'm giving something that isn't true too much power instead of connecting it to making me strong. And I think I got really good at actually doing this for a long time. But then I started to forget. And because life needed to take me back here. Life needed me to record this video and to connect these pieces because I thought, when I look at those pictures, when I was in Arizona, when I see myself, at that point, I thought I figured it all out. I was handling every mean person, all the bad energy. I was just warding that off left and right with a great attitude. I was staying positive. I was having fun. I was in it. I was the most myself I had felt in so long. But I still wasn't figuring out how to build my career over here because I was scared. And I would still have a lot of moments where it was really hard for me to post or to be authentic or to be real. And I still had a lot of really low moments that I did not do anything with. I just zoned out. And life said, girl, if you're not going to use this, if you're not going to become more vulnerable, you're never going to get uncomfortable. I got really comfortable where I was. And I got so comfortable that I didn't want to even look for things that made me uncomfortable. And then life changed. And life made things hard after hard after hard again. And I didn't handle it as well. And I resisted and fought against it and got sad and hibernated away and stopped doing the habits that I had been doing for so long. And I allowed the weight to come back on and I allowed the bad thoughts to come back in. But now I can see I had to, because I had to bring me back here. I had to go back to that moment on the ladder one more time. Who knows? I may end up back there more than once, but I needed it today. I needed it in this present moment to connect that that's not my truth anymore. Nobody is shaking the ladder. If somebody tried to shake the ladder now, I'd jump off and I'd whoop their ass. No, I'm just kidding. But we'd have a conversation. I'd whoop their ass in conversation. And I'd figure out what is happening. Why do you think you can do this? I'm not scared anymore like that. And I don't have to grip the ladder. I don't have to hold on for dear life. I know I can jump. I know I'll land. I know I'll be all right. And I know I can do whatever I need to do. I know that. And I've seen that. I've lived that. And honestly, that's been my whole life. Is learning how to get kicked and not just get back up, but thrive and use it and do something so beautiful with it that the person that was hurting me either changes too for the better or they just vanish. They can't even handle being around me anymore because they can't handle what I bring out within them. And I've repaired that relationship with that person. And granted, we've never really talked about this. So maybe we have more healing to come. But right now, I feel extremely blessed to have come as far as we have. I feel extremely blessed that my empathy, my compassion, my understanding of this life and this journey and other struggles has allowed me to release my anger and my hate towards him and transfer it back to love, to transfer it back to this good energy. And I know now also that I can give myself anything that I need. I can take any space I need. I can I can listen to what my body needs and I can honor that. And I don't owe anybody anything. Yeah, this was a big one. I'm going to take the day to do some really beautiful things for myself and just soak in what I'm processing. I hope this opened some doors for you. I hope that this resonated in deep, beautiful ways that makes you want to look at your own story and see it differently as well. And like I always say, nothing that is meant for you will miss you. And today I don't feel dumb. I don't feel like I'm struggling. And in fact, when I look back at my educational career, I took in the information I needed and I wanted, and I didn't need to waste my energy on any of that other stuff. And most of the things they were teaching us were bullshit anyway. I learned Black history from Black people. I didn't learn it in a school. I learned everything I learned about other cultures, communities, about other walks of life from direct walks of life. I actually feel like I'm ahead of the game in a lot of ways because I understand things that people that grew up in the world that I grew up don't, because they were brainwashed and they heard all of these things. And honestly, I look at it now like it did me a favor. It taught me more deeply than I ever could have had I been able to stay in that system. And I was in a place where I could have been very easily and heavily influenced. But y'all, everything I tried to get into, church, with school, they all resisted me because that information was false. It was a human narrative, and it was the wrong human narrative. It was a gift, and I can see that now. And every piece of this journey is a gift. No matter how hard it has been, it has built me into something beautiful. I hope you can look at your story and find that. How are you beautiful because of what you've been through? How are you ahead of the game because of what you've been through? How has it shaped you and changed you in an impactful, positive way? How has it been a gift to you? Let's all soak that in. Let's do what we do with this day. And let's make it ours.